Hey, welcome to another exciting edition of the Shoe and Show program. I'm your host today, Matt Priest, and I can't think in the 81-year history of this organization, FDRA, the sponsor of Shoe and Show, where we've been any busier because of what's happening in the marketplace. But we wanted to take time, and I'm bringing in Sandi on our team to introduce our guest today because we want to take time to kind of set aside some of the chaos. We are going to talk through it a little bit on this program, but also just hear a story about how someone got into the shoe biz, what they're doing to drive great product, both in the private label space as well as their own branded product, and just break bread on the issues of our time right now. And so, Sandi, without further ado, who's on Shoe and Show today with us?
Thanks, Matt. Today we have Marina Levine, CEO of Highline United. Thrilled to have you on, Marina. We've shared many stories and have been talking to you a lot lately about what's happening in the industry. And we're thrilled to have you on. But before we get into some of our questions, we'd love you to share with our listeners a little bit about your shoe story, how you entered the footwear market.
Sure. Well, most people end up in the footwear market accidentally, right? No one, it's very rare for someone like, oh, shoe designer, that's exactly what I want to be. But I did grow up loving fashion, really being infatuated with it. But I was born in St. Petersburg in Russia. And I came here when I was a young kid. And the story, the old age immigrant story was, the old adage, a lawyer, doctor, or engineer. So, it was never like a big part of my plan to pursue it seriously. I was in an art honors program in high school, and my art teacher told me, listen, why don't you go to business school? You could learn the ropes, you could learn baseline information, and then you'll do what you want later, and knowing you'll figure it out. So I kind of did that. I went to Cornell for hotel and business management. My first job out of college was at a hotel, a boutique hotel, which is the Royalton, still around, and it's an Ian Schrager property where there was a big fashion scene there. And I was working the front desk, met a few people, and that's kind of how I got my first job in fashion. Right away, I think I got too excited. I had a friend who was from Italy, and we decided, hey, I've worked 5 days in fashion. I could start a shoe brand. So we kind of did. She's from Italy. Her family had access to factories, albeit handbag factory. So of course it made sense for us to go into footwear. Of course. So, I was working front desk. That was my morning job. My night job was to sneak into her Parsons shoe design classes. So that's what I did at night. And then later in the night, we would actually make the shoes by hand.
Wow.
Yeah. In my apartment in the East Village, had a crooked floor. All the tools would roll down. And later in the night, much like any cool kid in the 90s, we would go clubbing and wear the stuff that we couldn't walk in, much less dance in. So an editor saw the shoes I was wearing. It was strappy stuff up to the knees. She featured them. And that's when, it wasn't all about paid advertising. People were just interested in amazing content. So we were featured in the magazine. And at that point, we just started, we went to the Small Business Association of New York City. That's an important thing. Mm-hmm. And they pair you with a mentor in the field of interest. So we found an old shoe dog, Harry Dannenberg, and he started to coach us. He directed us to a group of factories out of Italy into Brazil. We put together our first collection and received placement in anthropology in Nordstrom. We did that for a few years. We were in the same showroom at the time as like Rebecca Minkoff and Loeffler Randall. And then, was it Loeffler Randall? No, they were next door to us at shoe shows. And then 2008 hit, and we all know how that worked out.
Yep.
And at that point, I started working for Highline United, which is where I am now, but I was not there for many years. I went off again on my own after a few years there, started a private label business that still exists today in partnership with Highline, where we produce footwear for probably the hottest brands out there right now.
That's unbelievable. I don't think I've ever had a shoe story on Shoe and Show that started in Russia and ended up in Village and on a crooked floor, and then landed with 2 non-consecutive terms serving at Highline United.
Yes.
So, Marina, let me ask you this. Where's your place in the market today? Like, if I was to pull up a one page or a one sheet on Highline, what would be kind of the top kind of key points of what makes you guys so competitive in this space?
Well, Ash is a great brand that was there when I was working at Highline as a designer, the first go around. And, that brand was super hot and cool when I was there around 2010, 12, 13. And the brand was a European made brand. It was made in Italy, I believe some of it was made in France also. And eventually, because they got so hot with their wedge sneaker at that time, that eventually moved to Asia production. So we're factory owned. So that gives us like a really awesome competitive edge in terms of, having a lot of flexibility. But what I love about Ash as related to Highline is that it's this really elevated European aesthetic that we try to make palatable for the US marketplace. Ash goes out 50% Ash mainline, which are, single sole or platform shoes, more dress, and then Ash Sport, which at that time, we were the first ones really leaning in on the it sneaker concept. So now that I'm back here, I'm kind of trying to lean into that heritage and bring that back, because right now we're dealing with competition from all sides of, it sneakers and the must-have sneakers. So how do we differentiate? So we're trying to go back to the luxurious, refined material attitude that we had before. Now, the other brand that we have, which is Sanctuary, and that's a licensed partnership, we're trying to target the customer that has, a Vince and, rag and bone taste level, but a much lower budget. So we're trying to put that value into really clean, modern silhouettes that, echo that feeling. So all our uppers are leather. Right now we added this Oasis Comfort insole, which is a molded sock footbed. So, and we're leaning really heavy into cool constructions that you would find in brands like that, but are really out of reach. So that's how I would say, what we're doing these days with those brands.
You do a lot of incredible trend forecasting that I've seen.
Yes.
You shared some newsletters with me, and I think that some of your designers and your product development team, they really just have their finger on the pulse. And I'm curious, how do you do that? What resources you use, or like what inspires the team to do that?
Well, that's the piece I was really most excited to talk about. When I came back to Highline, I was trying to figure out what made the private label business successful and how do I bring it here. And one of the things that I do with my private label customers is I try to be the epicenter of the information that they receive. So they don't come to us and just, walk the factory and say, I like this construction, I like that construction. I'm out there traveling, whether it's Europe, Asia, wherever, Morocco, trying, putting together visions, mood boards for the product so they could come to us not only just on a, kind of what they're looking for. Of course, they send us their trend resources as well, but I like to kind of give it right back to them too. And so I feel like you can't win, being kind of a status quo shoe company anymore. You have to provide value added. So, the whole theme of Highline right now is to provide trend content as much as it is to provide product, because, I imagine those super expensive 10,000 a year, forecasting companies which do amazing work. I'm gonna guess in a few weeks they're gonna start to seem unaffordable, and we want to step in and provide that perspective, narrowed in on footwear specifically, but of course we talk about street style and everything else.
Well, you kind of reference like the current environment's impact on costing and affordability. So let's just go there, right?
Okay.
We've been having these conversations. You've been actively involved and engaged with our as a member of FDRA. You're providing some great comments and questions in our member calls particularly over the last few that we've had. So I want to thank you publicly for that.
Sure.
But put us in your mind space right now. I'm getting bombarded, and that's not hyperbole, by texts and calls and emails constantly about the concern in the marketplace. So let's just tap into how you're feeling about it. You've obviously been through a lot over your career. Mm-hmm. Everyone has highs and lows, but what I'm taking away, Marina, is that you're super entrepreneurial, you're scrappy in all the positive ways. Talk to me about how you're approaching this moment, and maybe there's some words of wisdom for our viewers and listeners that they can take away and be encouraged by what you're doing. So walk us through that.
Well, to me, this is basically a mirror of, a mirror potentially worse. I don't want to say that right now, of the other experiences I've been through, in this industry. Obviously I went through the economic crash of 2008. We went through COVID together, but there was always an arc during those moments. And for someone who's entrepreneurial and went from producing one shoe in the East Village to having to deliver to Nordstrom, every day was like that. Every day was one disaster after the other. It's one thing, to work in a corporation where you have where you have certain resources, but when you have just one or two partners, and your husband is doing X, Y, and Z because you're about to blow your head off. Mm-hmm. There is this natural arc that occurs where there's immediate panic. Then there's silence. And then there's a bullet point list. Mm. And that has been the same process through each one of those moments. And guess what? Not all of them were always successful through the bullet points. But eventually, if you compile them all, it has put us here and it has put me here. And that's basically, I'm trying to address this, this situation, this challenge with that same mindset. Those first few days, I was, if I wasn't working, I was crying. Yeah. And probably that will continue for a while. But at the same token, I'm here for X number of hours a day. And we're going to go through each issue bullet by bullet, make a decision, and hope the net of those decisions are positive.
What are your factory friends and partners saying to you from overseas? Like what is their, we could assume, and we know what we've heard kind of top line, but can you share any insight or intel on, what specifically they're sharing? We know what the mood is, but.
So, we have a different relationship with our factories because we are, in fact, factory owned. There's a bunch of our facilities that are in China. So we're in the eye of the storm, but we also partner with other factories that are outside of China, and that represents a huge chunk of our business as well. What they're saying is they have always been my factory partner, even through some of these in the history that I've talked about. I was at Highline in the beginning. The private label business has been with them, so they understand that this is a roller coaster. Every night we speak, and every night we go through solution points together. So it's almost, I can't speak to the whole industry and what they're experiencing, but I can speak to the fact that they're trying to be as collaborative as possible. And we're super, super, I can't say super enough times, lucky to have them as partners because they're amazing on a good day. They are angelic on a bad day.
Mm. Yeah, that's great to hear. That is what we need right now is partners to kind of step up to the table and figure out solutions and look for hopeful, creative ways that we're going to kind of get through this. There's no other way. And I think that some people are really just so negative and down in the dumps about this, understandably so, that like they're having a hard time coming to the table with any ideas,
Yes.
any ways to collaborate and think about things. So we're grateful for your support at FDRA, and I'm thrilled that you guys are members. I think that you're very active in sharing your voice and your story, both with us and other partners, but also outwards to legislators and things.
Yeah.
So share a little bit about that and what that means to you and why you're doing all of that.
So before I joined Highline, where I was doing, the very easy work of private label for a limited scope of big players, right? I was always very politically active. I was always interested. My son is interested in that. There was always a side of me that felt that if you're going to make a change, you got to be the one that raises your hands. No one's going to do it for you. So I was on the RTM, which is it's similar to the House of Representatives for my for my city, which is Greenwich, Connecticut. I mean, I grew up in New York, lived in New York most of my life, but moved there when I had kids and felt that if I was ever to need a job, Greenwich has a few shoe companies out there.
A few, just a couple.
Just a few. So meanwhile, I've never worked there, but that's beside the point. So I joined after Trump was elected the first time, I joined our local House of Representatives and started to become active there. And I learned a lot. And I resigned just before starting Highline because it was like, it would be too much of a burden. And I had a very big shift in opinion after I joined our House of Representatives, which, by the way, is the second largest governing body compared to the actual House of Representatives for the country. I know we're a little, Greenwich is a little superfluous. I mean, we could say that. So, I was very aggressive, very active as an activist. But what I learned when I joined an actual political body is that everything happens in the middle.
That is so true.
Yeah. And then, we waste so much time on the extremes of thought or in extremes of ideas, but in reality, it all shakes out in the middle.
Yeah.
So that's basically same thing, my approach at work, in work as well.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach. And as an organization, we get accused of a lot of different things, particularly as being as vocal and out front as we are right now. But one thing we are very proud of is that we're apolitical in that sense, that we respect all viewpoints, and we're going to respect people as they come into the organization and engage. We're going to respect policymakers as we engage, even if we disagree with them. But we are super partisan when it comes to tariffs, trade, and we will be the tip of the spear as we've become known as during this crisis when it comes to the threats that are being placed on American business like yourself. And so your active engagement is awesome, and I want to thank you for it. And kind of,
I want to thank you. I mean, your guys are awesome. Like, obviously, I knew very little about the organization before I joined Highline because my work before was very siloed. So I didn't need to deal with Fanny or shoe shows or anything. I mean, I participated in them in the past, but it's been a real pleasure getting to know you. And I think I didn't even answer your question. Why am I so active? But for that reason, I understand. Receiving information when I was in the government from constituents, that's basically what we led with, or what I led with. I wanted to reflect the people I represented. And, I feel you're doing the same thing, and you need the support of your constituents who are these shoe companies, meaning us. And we need to share, the struggle we're experiencing right now. And I need people to understand that.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's how we view it. We view it, some of us worked on Capitol Hill, and, Sandi worked at a major publication.
Yeah.
And so you have a constituency, right? You're serving the broader good of an industry. And so we have a mandate. The mandate's given to us by our members and by our board of directors. And we want to execute well against that mandate. And I think we're doing the best we can, let me ask you this, where a year from now, let's say we're having this conversation,
Okay.
and I don't know what's going to happen, but are there silver linings that you think all this is going to strengthen you in some way, or is it all downside risk that is just not even worthy of considering a silver lining? I want to play like devil's advocate to my own internal frustration with this, and just maybe there's something on the back end of this that I'm not thinking about that will be a positive outcome in spite of the destruction and the chaos.
Well, there's always a silver lining to everything. I mean, that's how you have to operate through your bullet points, right? Like you have to go, like, if we do this, then this is going to be the positive outcome. But I think what we're looking at as a company is, it from a product point of view, is to cut anything that doesn't make us say, wow, right away. That's a narrow conversation strictly as related to product. What I'm hoping in terms of the industry of what happens through this process, and it's almost like a message I'd like to convey, is that, we work in this trifecta, right? We have our factories, the wholesalers, which are basically us, and then we have major stores or independent stores, for the end use consumer. I've always felt that, and especially recently, like I didn't love some of the burdens and expectations that there are sometimes between vendor and major store.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to take this opportunity to say, listen, we're going to work together and figure this out, and not play this game of, I'm going to play this card. And right. That's what, every meeting as soon as I feel there's a card being raised, I'm like, not today. So, that's what I'm hoping is the silver lining, that there is this understanding that everyone is trying to survive. We're going to eat a little bit. You're going to eat a little bit. And at the end, what's going to happen is we all survive. And certainly we should not allow, the little guys to be, as I wrote in the letter to the editor, the, sacrificial lambs in this process. Like, we want to protect, big, wonderful companies like Mark Fisher, but we also want to protect everyone else who kind of, has a very specific purpose.
Yeah.
That's fair. And we appreciate that. We are trying to find the silver linings as well. It has brought our industry together, and we're strong because of members like you. And so we do appreciate, again, you come to the table with your story, with your honesty, with your support, and your voice. We're looking forward to having everyone back in New York during Fanny. We're looking forward to seeing many, many people in DC in a couple weeks' time in April.
Yeah, I just signed up for that.
Yep.
Awesome.
You're coming with a few people, and that's going to be pretty amazing. So thank you for joining us. And is there anything else that we missed that you want to share with our listeners?
I think we're good.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we can't thank you enough, as Sandi said, and we hope that we all are stronger after this. Like, I think we're building like strength when there's challenge, and your story from start to finish, Marina, is a display of that in real life. So thank you for coming on and sharing with us and being honest with us. That's what we need most in these conversations, and you're authentic and honest. And I want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Yeah, folks, this
we need a moment of fun, right?
Say that again.
I said, this was fun. We need this moment of fun, or a little bit of inspo here and there.
We do. We definitely need inspo. I've never heard that before, and so I'm going to steal it from you and use it.
Come on. Don't you have like a 12-year-old running around the house or something?
I've got a 15, an 18, and a 20, 19 and 20-year-olds running around. So I wasn't listening when they were running around. So. Sure. All right, Maria, thank you again. And folks, thanks for watching and listening to Shoe and Show. We're so grateful that we have an audience. We've been doing this 9 years, and I'm never ceased to amaze by the guests and the caliber of people that come on our program and are part of this industry, like Marina and so many others. So make sure you go to shoeandshow.com to check out all of our episodes and our entire catalog, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, Shoe and Show is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.